Huh. Few things. Actually, I'm a little puzzled now. The lead dressing on all this is more intact than I'm used to seeing, which makes me less inclined to think that the chassis was ever pulled out. Except some of the chassis mounting screws are missing. But to see like this little thing twisted around a high voltage lead, this little thing twisted around the IF signal, that's odd. But I also noticed that the video output tube was not in that socket. It got knocked out. So that's probably why we didn't have any snow on the screen, because we couldn't have any snow on the screen. I see no signs it's been worked on. That's decades of fuzz built up on this chassis. And why did that drop down? I don't know. But if you ever want to put one of these back together right, there should be a little twist metal thing here around the high voltage lead. There should be a twist there around the yoke connector. There should be one around the IF lead that goes up into the tuner. And there should be the one here on the control harness that screws into that. As with the other sets, I've got a trusty solo cup handy to collect any screws or loose parts. Let's take a little bit of a closer look. Brush some of this dirt away. That looks a little odd. Oh, I see. Yeah, there's another revision change. It's the same on that Toms that I started working on recently, where there's a cap that was soldered across the volume control, a low value ceramic cap. Yep, original. Man, I gotta get the vacuum. This is just fluff. This is just years and years of dust. This set was probably not around a smoker for a nice refreshing change. There's no corrosion, so this was also in a very dry environment. Oh boy, that might be the only speck of rust anywhere on this set. The chassis is just pristine. Lovely, lovely. Well, electrical tape around it. I wonder if those look like the original diodes. Don't think that electrical tape's original, though. Well, it is really brittle. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. It's even got the little cardboard cover over this cap. Yeah, in spite of... So there should be 1, 2, 3, I believe 5 chassis bolts. There are only 3 present, and one of them was the wrong size. They should all be like this. And this in 5/16, but there was 1/4 inch, and it was in a weird angle, and 2 were missing. But if somebody pulled this out... Oh, okay, it's not all the original tubes, so maybe somebody just pulled it out a little bit to replace tubes? Or, well, I mean, that one tube somehow got knocked out of its socket, so somebody did that somehow. But you can change the tubes without pulling the chassis out. Oh, okay, these are a little hard to get at. That's why you can actually pull the chassis out without disconnecting everything. They do give you... Like, I haven't pulled this high voltage wire out yet. They do give you some length on these cables. You can run the set with it out, except for the speaker. That you do have to disconnect. If I was to unclip this wire, it would pull out as well. Alright, next up, I think it's time to vacuum clean. Move this off. But first, let's completely disengage this chassis from the cabinet. To do that, we need to get this one wire out. I didn't get a good shot with the earlier sets because it's tough to get lighting in here because there's a flip top on it. But you take out a 1/4 screw there, flip this up. Got a high voltage tube there. You very, 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 very carefully take that off. It's going right to the flyback over there. Here's a donut, which has old wax on it. You don't want to damage that. You don't want to break this wire off. Notice there's been zero issues with the flybacks. I haven't even bothered looking at any of them because it just doesn't. It's been my experience that they're just fine. They may look terrible, but they worked fine. That is the original Philco tube, by the way. And that little stickiness there, that is some high voltage. This is stuff, some goo they put on there, like insulating grease kind of stuff. And that is the high voltage lead. There's that stickiness. I notice I also don't discharge things very often. This time I will because the set was on not that long ago. There might be a little bit of high voltage. Should I take a tool? There's an exposed metal end on that. I'm just going to touch it to this. No, oh, no, yeah, there was a little bit of a snap. And there, that's all it takes to get it out. Just flip it up and out she goes. Make sure it's discharged. The rest of the stuff discharges. With the set's working, when you turn it off, the caps discharge very quickly. It's really just the high voltage that made every little residual something in it. And the very last thing is that volume cluster, which again is pristine. There's even some old masking tape over it. That, in my mind, is the most difficult thing to get at. It's kind of tucked up there awkward. It's deep in the cabinet. And, well, if you have a socket with a long extender on it, it does make life a bit easier. I'm definitely getting better at this. Those are 3/8 inch nuts. Another tool from the Mr. Lil estate. It was long enough to get in there and got it out. Piece of cake. I'll remember that in the future. I'll keep this tool handy. My apologies if this is getting boring. I've just never seen one this pristine. There's even a little bit of green tape over the linearity control. Still a label up here above the yoke socket. Here's this control cluster out. The masking tape over the back of it. And there was even another one of those little bent pieces of metal holding that wiring harness in place. And hey, this is even, well, this cracked. Oh, I don't think I've ever seen one of these that has not been broken. Well, we have replacements, so that's not a big deal. Yeah, this is a treat. I mean, it'd be nice if they were all like this. Completely untouched. I just finished rebuilding the second main board of the 5 Predictas, and I'm going to start giving all these sets nicknames so we can keep track of them more easily. So this is the Bent Neck Princess. This is Tom's Princess. That's Brian's Princess. So I want to start on the Brian set next. I'm going to put these 2 boards aside, clear off some of the debris that's left after working on these boards, all the clipped off leads and all the resistors, and we are going to try out the new unwrapping tool which just arrived. It's also a wrapping tool. We'll talk more about this once I clear the decks and set up a tripod. Alright, here is the tool. I say it can both wrap and unwrap because the handle unscrews. This would be the wrapping end, where there is a small hole where you would feed in your wire that's been stripped, and then you put that over the post, and then you twist it around and it wraps the wire. And this is the unwrapping end. That's what we care about right now. So let's give it a try. Let's start on this guy. And we should be able to just do this. Oh yeah. It does get hung up a little bit. So this has threads on it. It's got a very sharp hook at the very end, or not hook, but like tip, kind of. Well, it spirals and it just kind of trails off, and there's a sharp point, and that's what grabs the end of the wrapped wire. Do this. What's getting hung up on is I unwrap the wire, it's wrapping around the threads on the tool, which is probably supposed to do. It just makes it, yeah, spend a moment to do that. Now, if I wanted to rewrap it, I'd probably have to straighten that out with the needle nose, such that I could fit it into the other end. And this tool is supposed to be able to handle this gauge of wire. In the past, when I rewrap them, I typically break off about half of the wire and just rewrap what's left using needle nose. I've never tried actually wrapping it before. But if one were to, it would go something like this. And then you put it on that post. Do that. It's a very sloppy job, but that's the gist of it. So my restoring buddy that I was chatting with about this, he says it should take less than 5 minutes with a good unwrapping tool. So let's see. We've got 2 done so far. I mean, yeah, there's no question. Oh, this was a dual, so we got to get the second wire off. There's no question that this considerably speeds up the process. And so on and so forth. Broken off bits of wire kind of clogging at the end. That's a drag. It's the only downside I see to this so far. I'm just about done with the third board. I'm definitely getting faster as I do more of these. The new wire wrap tool helps a lot. So we have the bent princess, we have Tom's princess, we have Brian, and now we're going to bring up a 4th set. Next set up, it's another beige princess, similar to mine, but it does not have the UHF option. And we're going to call this Sigi, S-I-G-I. That's the owner's name. This one may be the most interesting of the group. I say that because it's been worked on by someone else. And we did power it up. And with a bit of tinkering, we were able to get a full raster, but really no reception. I'll power it up again in a moment and show you. It has issues. We got a floppy antenna. There should be a spring down in there, a tensioning spring that seems to be gone, and the end of it's broken off. So we may or may not be able to salvage that. Something happened with the tuner stuff. So it should have 2 sets of twin lead, one for the internal antenna, one going into the tuner, and it's a mess. Oh, well, here's, okay, so it does have the internal one, but both ends, they're gone. They should have push pins on the ends of them, and they've been cut off and stripped back, and kind of messy. It's been fully recapped by somebody at some point. Not done terribly long ago. They use those common yellow caps you can get from some of the vendors out there. There are little perf boards for rebuilt networks like I used to do before I could get reproductions. I would guess it was recapped within the last 10 years, probably even more recent than that. The linearity control must have been bad, and they put in this huge rheostat on a custom plate with a power resistor, probably because they couldn't get the right value. I don't know. The reason we powered up is I could see that it had been worked on pretty recently. So I wasn't too worried about that. And it looks like they did a halfway decent job. But, I mean, who knows? We saw on one of the other sets, I think it was Tom's, that they recapped it, but they didn't use the right value. The component value was wrong. The voltage rating was wrong. So that's why I want to go over everything. And I can come up with a better part that fits in here better than that solution. And we'll, who knows what we're going to find out. That's why I think this will be the most interesting, because I don't know what they did to this thing. From what I can see, it looks okay, but I need to scrutinize everything. Another reason I want to get in there and work on this is that apparently the original electrolytics are still in there, so that it did not exactly do a full recap. Okay, the set is plugged in. Let's give it a shot. And amazingly, again, the power switch is still good. So notice almost all the original screws are gone. So there are some screws here for the back, and like to hold this high voltage box on. None of those are right. And hey, there is our full raster. So, very good starting point for this set. So again, all the power switch is good. I don't know if it's luck or I just had good customers, but all these sets are all completely restorable, no major issues. No flyback issues, no picture tube issues, no power transformer issues. It's just really a matter of course, doing the full recap on all the boards, replacing out a spec, I'm just going to replace all the resistors, and then we're going to see one by one as we go through there. I'm sure there's going to be tweaking necessary. Hopefully, all these controls are going to be good on all of them. At some point, my luck will run out, I expect, but so far, things are going really well. So let's get this chassis out and take a closer look and see what all happened to this set. Alrighty, we've got Sigi's chassis pulled out. So what do we know? Well, start with a simple thing. High voltage rectifier is the original. I think it has been in every single one of these sets. It has been fully recapped, except for the electrolytics, which is kind of the main thing you really normally would do. But they didn't take the wires off the board. There may be only a few, like this one's just barely hanging on. But the rest appear to be intact. So how can you do that? Well, some of the stuff you can get at from underneath. It's not a solid sheet of metal. There are some holes. It's not easy. You'd be kind of working blind on some of them, and I can see the soldering job is not the greatest. And there's some kind of ugly repair there, although I'm not sure why. Or you can leave the wires attached, undo the stakes, which they did do. That's kind of ugly too. This whole thing is kind of ugly. But I can see that there is solder work on every one of these. So I think what they did is they left the wires connected, they undid the stakes, and they manipulated the board with all the wires still attached. Again, you can do it. It's not easy though. And at the point where you're struggling with all that, all the wires and all that stuff, I'd say just unwrap them. Just unwrap them. It's not the end of the world to reconnect things. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Otherwise, it's dirty, it's filthy, which again makes me wonder, well, we'll find date codes on some of this stuff. Alright, you know, I was saying that the... yeah, okay, so they did some interesting substitutions. So, we've got a Vima 470 picofarad, 6,000 volt cap, paralleled up with a little cap below. It's supposed to be 1,500 picofarad rated for 1,000 volts. I'm guessing it's 1,000 picofarad cap underneath it, but I wonder what the voltage rating is. Is it 1,000 volts or not? Most of the rest of these, I mean, it's fine. It's the ETR, MET yellow axial caps that are so often used. But I'm seeing more and more of these values are wrong. In fact, I think just about all these caps are the wrong value. I'll tell you why. These caps are the old style system. So this should be a 0.22 microfarad cap. It's a 0.2. Or sorry, that should be a 0.022. It's a 0.02. That should be a 0.22. It's a 0.2. That should be a 0.0068. It's a 0.006. In other words, it's 6,000 picofarads. It should be 6,800, and so on and so on. They did not replace one single resistor. Oh, that's a bummer. They took out the socket for the selenium AFC dual diode and just crammed in a couple silicon diodes. Why not leave the socket? Ooh, okay, they did replace some resistors there. I stand corrected. That looks a little ugly. So, it's a little annoying that now I see all the caps are the wrong value, which makes me more inclined to just go through and do what I usually do. They also used some of these green caps here and there. They're not inherently bad. You just don't typically see them, or you see them in lower voltage applications. I think they're all polyester film, so it's not a big deal. I think that's a replacement, or at least it doesn't look like the other ones I've seen in other sets. They put some modern silicon diodes in there, probably 1N4007s. They put a new insulating sheet over this, which I'm going to guess is a homemade fusible resistor. Oh, it's just a fuse. So there should be a current limiting resistor in there. If you're going to use a fuse, that's okay, but add a current limiting resistor in series. They did not. But at least it's got a fuse. We'll see if it's the right rating or not. It's an interesting solution. And by the way, they do still make fusible resistors. I'm going to talk about that more in a bit. I happen to have a little treasure trove stash of new old stock ones. I got about 20 of them left. They do make them. They just don't look like they used to. They don't have those plugs on the end. But you can get the right value, right wattage. It's corroded, so I'll be taking that off and giving it a bath in Evapo Rust. Probably same on the high voltage box. Otherwise, do the usual brushing and vacuuming. This guy got a bit corroded too. It's a local distance switch. So not terrible, but it is the worst of all the sets we've looked at so far in terms of being kind of chewed up. And well, the other thing that annoyed me, not one single wiring harness or lead was where it was supposed to be. None of them were resecured and routed the way. Yeah, it's not a huge difference for most of them, but for some of them, I think it does make a bit of a difference, or at least the service info indicates that it does. And luckily, between reference photos and the detailed service info and having this pristine example, I know exactly where they should all go. So we'll get everything back to snuff. Now, as far as this goes, here you can see what the original was like. It's mounted behind here, and you access it through that hole. It's a little trimmer you do with a screwdriver. So it's just completely gone, the linearity control. They cut out a thin metal plate and attached a huge rheostat here. It doesn't dissipate that much wattage. You don't need a huge rheostat. It's like a 1 watt resistor, I think, would be sufficient, or a 1 watt pot. let's see, they paralleled it with a 5-watt 1.5K. And the original, I think, was 1.5K, so I wonder what did they put in here. Can we see? I don't see a value on it. Alright. So I'm going to get out to my wire wrapping tool and get to town, and we'll do the same thing on this as all the other boards. Let's see. This is also a dual 22K. So out of all the sets we've done so far, they've basically all been the same revision, except I think the only one that was different is mine. And even the color of the board is different. Yeah, this has the... So right in the middle there, most of these sets have two 22K resistors next to each other. This has a 10K, and they didn't use some of the parts. This is the most recent revision. These others have all been like runs 4 or run 5, whereas this is a run 7, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, see how the board color is different. They're the conformal coating. This is green, the rest are all yellowish. Very, very, very similar. Just a handful of parts that are slightly different values. Just got to be careful. I did an interesting little deal here. There is a capacitor from one side of the AC line to ground, so that should be replaced with the proper type of AC rated capacitor. It'd be a type Y. It looks like they put 2 caps and 2 resistors all in parallel. I'm not sure why they overcomplicated that. They definitely put some time and effort into this and some money. These little perf boards are just about all mica caps. I've seen far, 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 far worse. This is not a horrible job by any means. Huh, there is one resistor replaced from the top side. Interesting. Or if that's a part he just couldn't get at from underneath. I'm not entirely sure whether the board was lifted out with the wires attached, or did they try and gave up and did everything from the top. Well, the resistor got replaced from the top there. What do I mean by that? I mean they clipped out the old part and left the leads sticking up and then wrapped the new parts around the stub of the old leads. But all the caps appear to go through whole. Interesting. My final thought is, it does make me wonder if somebody went to considerable amount of time and effort and money, but didn't replace any of the electrolytics. Oh, wait, no, I stand corrected on that, too. You know, I'm kind of wondering if somebody in the area... There aren't that many people that restore TVs, and most of us know each other, at least online. This has been restuffed. That was uncrimped and opened up and a new cap put inside. Can't tell if this one... Oh yeah, that one was too. And people ask me all the time, hey, do you leave notes, or what? Don't you? Somebody might tear out your new parts if you restuff. It's pretty easy to tell once you know what to look for. This has been restuffed. Ah, I just remembered I need to make a correction. Oh! This is not actually the CRT that goes or that came with this set. This is from one of mine. See, when the owner dropped off the set, he hung out with me for a while, and I tested the picture tube. We tried to power up. When I tested the picture tube, I showed an HK short, which I later learned on, thanks to one of you, who was very observant and noticed the control settings on my Suncor CR70, that I had one of the knobs in the wrong position. So it turns out that his picture tube is not shorted. However, while he was here, I thought it was, so I swapped his CRT head unit out with one of mine. So I need to take this off and put his on here, actually. This is from my Predictapalooza, which is, like, I think, like the second or third antique TV that I ever acquired years and years ago. Unfortunately, when we moved, it got damaged, which is why you haven't heard me talk about it in a while. I was just about done with it. I repainted it. It was the first Predicta I ever restored. I started working on the arms. I cleaned the corrosion off of this one. It needs to get painted. But yeah, unfortunately, this happened. So unfortunately, a lot of mine need to have either new covers made or them repaired or something. We're going to talk about that more in a dedicated video, because I want to know, and I'm not the only one, can we make these? Using the latest 3D printing and molding techniques and whatever, can we make a model of this, get injection mold made or whatever it takes, and knock out a few thousand of these for all the collectors out there? How much can it cost? Well, we'll discuss.